Программа предназначена к просмотру для лиц старше 16 лет.
Инди-игры – особый жанр или побочный продукт гейм-индустрии. Кто-то относится к ним скептически, другие ждут их победы над мейнстримом. Я готов доказать, что инди – это целый мир. И даже больше.
Лос-Анджелес. В этом солнечном городе находится мрачная студия Head Machine. Ее создатель, Алекс Престон, трансформировал свою борьбу со смертью в искусство и создал потрясающую игру Hyper Light Drifter о том, как страшная болезнь может вдохновить на создание одного из лучших инди-проектов года в этом выпуске.
Hello. I'm Alex Preston. I'm a creator of Heart Machine and Hyper Light Drifter. Sure. As far as Heart Machine goes, I officially started in 2013 during the Kickstarter. But I have been working on the game with my partner Bo. He created Samurai Gun for about 9 months before we launched the Kickstarter. Before that, personal history, I was just freelancing, doing a lot of commercials and doing stuff for artists and, I don't know, doing a lot of different things because I never really found what I actually wanted to do until I started making video games. I have a lot of health problems. I was born with a congenital heart condition, and congenital means you're born with it. So I have a congenital heart condition and a lot of other fun problems that stem from compromised immune system and genetic mutations. So I spent a lot of time in hospitals in my life, and you know, it's something that looms over my head and something that I have a lot of time to think about. So the Heart Machine logo and the name have a lot to do with what I've experienced in my life. The game itself isn't anything revolutionary, but I guess the style, things that I'm trying to say with it, resonates with people for any number of reasons. I think auteurship is a big deal, and people can identify with that stuff. You look at successful indies, and oftentimes it's because of the voice behind the work. So you look at Undertale, and it's a pretty simple game, and there's nothing like crazy revolutionary about it or anything, but it's because the author himself was able to put some very personal touches in there and a lot of characterizations and whatever else. And so I think with Hyperlight, you know, there's a lot of stylistic choices that are very much representative of me personally and what I like. So people are interested in that. People are interested in artistic vision. So it was bonkers. Yeah, it was really crazy. The past 3 years of my life have been I've had a lot of crazy years in my life for bad reasons and good reasons. And 2013 was particularly strange because it went from being the worst year of my life, where I was hospitalized, I'd lost a lot of weight, I was down to 90 pounds, and I was on a feeding tube. It was not a fun time, but I was working on this game in my hospital bed. And then I launched a Kickstarter later in the year, and it exploded. And I'm the type that likes to plan for a lot of things and brace himself for stuff, but I didn't necessarily plan for a success like that. So I guess the thing that stuck with me the most is the fact that a lot of people reached out during the Kickstarter with their own personal stories about their health issues and challenges throughout life, like complete strangers that I was very surprised to receive that stuff, and that more than anything has stuck with me because that takes a lot of courage to do. And from personal experiences, like sharing, I'm typically a very private person, or have been in the past, but the Kickstarter changed all that, and so now I'm very public about my health situation and whatever else is going on, and that's kind of relieving in a way to be able to share that stuff with anybody and everybody, and not keep it so private, because otherwise you'd be a very sad person. I've played a bit of it. It's a tough game to get through because I know Ryan and his wife a little bit now. I met them not too long ago. They've been around in the community for a while, and we've spoken about our experiences separately, and it's like because of my shared experiences with them, and it's hard sometimes to get through that. It's like it makes me want to cry a lot, and I know that's true for a lot of people who haven't even experienced some of this stuff, because it's a really touching story, and it's a very sad story, and yeah, it's a powerful experience, and it's hard for me personally to get through, so I haven't finished it. My issues afford me a certain perspective and motivation that maybe others don't necessarily have, because I don't know, when you face death enough, then other problems become much smaller, and it also forces me to do the things and only the things that I want to actually do, rather than wasting time. The strongest influence is Link to the Past. I grew up watching my brother play Zelda games, and I didn't really get them until I was old enough to play them myself and experience them, and that was later in the life cycle of the SNES. Like, I watched him play the original Zelda, and I didn't quite get it then. I was more of like a Mario Brothers guy, or kid. I was a tiny baby, I was like, I get this, but Zelda's much harder, and like graphically less appealing for a kid. But when I hit a certain age, it's like Link to the Past just clicked with me, and I was like, oh, okay, so this is the kind of stuff that's possible with video games, and I can see where this could go. And that really resonated with me and stuck with me for a long time. And then Super Metroid was another touchstone, because I rented that one day, and I was a poor kid, so I didn't have a lot of money to buy video games, but I rented it, and I was like, okay, this is a super interesting game, but it took me a little while to click with that, and then really understanding the things that they were doing with atmosphere building in that game, like beyond anything I'd seen in a video game before. So just like the music, the tone, the sound effects, the world that they're presenting, like there's no real words in that game beyond a few lines of narration in the beginning, and they're able to make you feel a certain way throughout the entire experience that's intense. And yeah, that game stuck with me for a very long time. So you can see elements of Super Metroid in that game too. It's a very powerful experience in itself as a kid, and even later on, even now, it still holds up really well. You're like, wow, they did things with atmosphere building, and just it's a damn good game. I have always loved really well done pixel art, and it's not just pixel graphics; it's an art form in itself. So if you look at some of the best looking pixel graphic games, like Final Fantasy VI or whatever else, like there's some immaculate details in there. There's a lot of skill that goes into that, and artistically it's super inspiring. So I wanted to do something in that vein, but updated and different and in my own style. So and I think pixel art is one of those components that a lot of indies see as a simple solution. There's plenty of examples of really good pixel art out there with indies, but like any style that is simpler to start with, there's going to be a saturation point of it, and people are going to clone stuff. People are going to find things they're inspired by, and you look at indie devs doing 3D stuff, and there's a lot of similarities there too, where they're like, okay, low poly, no faces, no textures, basic lighting, and it's like, yeah, you're stripping it down to its core components. And pixel art is kind of that in 2D form, where you don't have to worry about high res. It's easier to work with it, but ultimately it's just as hard if you want it to look good. If you want it to convey a certain artistic vision, it's still going to be just as hard as doing it in high res or polygons or whatever else in different ways. It's still challenging to make something look good and look your own. I think people in general, like general public and whatever else, is starting to realize that games take a while to make, and this game is much more than 3 years. Like, this was me sketching out ideas for years on this stuff before I even went into real pre-production on it or prototyping or anything. So 2.5 years since the Kickstarter of full-time production is actually a pretty short amount of time in comparison with a lot of games. The things that people don't realize or are starting to realize and get the sense of is that a lot of games that are announced at E3 or these big shows or whatever, AAAs and all that, like not only do they have massive teams, but they've been in development for years, and they just don't say anything about it until they're ready to. And then it's like, okay, it's coming out in a year. And people are like, oh yeah, games only take a year. It's like, no. It's like Battlefield 1 has been in development for years, you know? Like, each Call of Duty has 2+ years on their cycle. Even the biggest of games take a long time. Yeah, I mean, so the way that we present things is we ask players to pay attention, and we ask a lot of the player to really interpret what we're saying in the world. So it's not straightforward. It's not like we're going to give you there's no text in the game really. So it requires the player to pay attention. It requires the player to develop their own ideas and thoughts on what we're presenting and examine things in ways that a lot of other games don't. And so, sure, plenty of people have gone through it and they don't understand, or they don't interpret it in the same ways, and that's fine. That's part of the aesthetic of the game. That's part of the intent. Is like you will interpret it as you do, and the main character himself. Sure, you could describe him as shady. You know, I mean, he's murdering a ton of creatures, so yeah. I guess I would describe him more as selfish, more as just very focused on his primary goal. Because, you know, if you're at that point, then what else are you gonna do? Unless you're a very gracious person, it's like, and sacrificing yourself. But this character isn't necessarily. Yeah, I mean, it's hard. It's funny because doing a game without words is really challenging, and I don't think I would do that again. It was a huge handicap throughout production in a lot of ways, because expressing some complicated ideas just through visuals is really difficult. And even when we were successful in that stuff, people still interpret it differently. So it's a big challenge, and I'm glad we did it. But I don't think I would try that again. I think I want to use text next time around. I don't know. I mean, in any game, there's no perfect way to teach a player, because I mean, Nintendo's the best example of this stuff, where they make games and teach you everything you need to know, almost always by doing rather than showing or just like making you read. So they're the masters of that stuff. But even then, it's still like you can miss things, or things are difficult to do, and it depends on the complexity of the game. Like Nintendo games are typically very simple and straightforward, or some of their larger franchises are at least. So it's easier for them to teach certain lessons, but learning curve is a hard thing, and we did the best that we could through tutorialization and through repetition of certain components to really make sure people got it. And we used text as a supplemental thing, because some of the things in there are complicated ideas, like, you know, recharging your battery when you hit enemies. Like, that's not an easy thing that people understood. We did a lot of playtesting, so learning curve just requires a ton of playtesting. And even in that case, you can get it wrong, or it's just like it doesn't resonate with certain people, or other people just do not get it. And you see that happen in games all the time, where, like, I just played Uncharted 4 recently, and in the UI, there's like grapple points, and they have a big giant graphic up there, and you're like, there's a grapple point up here, because I'm sure that in their QA and their playtests, people are like, I don't know where to go, because people just don't look up in 3D games very often. So it's lessons like that you have to learn the hard way by just grinding through playtesting. And for our game, you know, we settled pretty early on with the fact that it's going to be a challenging game. But we always wanted it to be fair. And I think we accomplished it being a hard game, but a fair game. Like, I like challenging games. I like Dark Souls. I like old NES games because of that reward at the end of the challenge, where, you know, you look at the Zelda series, it went from a hardcore game in the very beginning. Like, the first Zelda's goddamn hard. That's a brutal game. There's no forgiveness there at all. And they don't tell you where to go anywhere. Like, there's no direction in that game. But it's amazing in that respect, because it trusts the player to be smart, and it trusts the player to want to explore this world and figure things out. And that's all the more rewarding than the opposite end of the spectrum with Skyward Sword, which I hated that game in so many ways. I mean, I still love aspects of it, it's still a Zelda game, but man, like the tutorialization, all the hand-holding they did, the constant reminders, it's the complete opposite of where that series started, and it's so frustrating to see like all the great things about Skyward Sword and then like the heavy stuff they stacked on top of it, where they're just like shoving things down your throat and be like, you have to do this. It's like, just let me be in this world, you know, and let me experience the stuff and figure stuff out and fail. And even the boss battles got way easier as time went on. Where I was like, then whatever. There's no challenge here, and so the reward is far less. And you can go to the old Zelda games, like, holy crap, I just beat that terrible boss and that awful dungeon after the 80th try. I feel amazing. I'm gonna throw my console out the window. I'm gonna take a walk, but I feel great. Yeah, collaborated with Disasterpiece. I had a friend who knew him, who had been his drummer at a few live shows, and so I was like, hey, can you give me his email? I sent him an email with a basic Kickstarter pitch. He's like, cool, I'm on board. And then we started talking. It's pretty straightforward. Like, Rich is a very straightforward guy, and so am I. And he's like my favorite video game composer, so I was fortunate to get him on board. And yeah, over the past 3 or 2.5 years or so, we've just been collaborating on the soundtrack. Like, you know, I would set a tone or an idea down or like some atmosphere that I'd want to build in a particular region, and he'd respond to that and be like, okay, this is what I got based on that idea. So, you know, the soundtrack was a much more collaborative process than I expected at the beginning. There are a lot of lengthy nights that we spent together just talking tracks out and like the atmosphere and tone that we wanted to build for specific areas in the game, and how we wanted to build things and all that. So it was a super enjoyable collaborative process between us. Absolutely. I think it was Roger Ebert that argued that games were an art. Like there was this whole stupid article that he wrote about that, and I know the man's dead and gone, but boy, did I hate him, because he was completely wrong about that. Like, not only are there's just tons of great art in games just by virtue of the fact that there are graphics there and there's a lot of great texture work or sprite art or whatever else, like incredible artists working their magic, or like, you know, games music is like some of my favorite music of all time. There's such great craft in that. It's like, how can you discount even just the basic components when you break them out that are pure art? And then it coming together in itself is an art form. Of course it is, 100%. Like, anybody who argues differently is a fool. And I will fight them tooth and nail on that stuff. Like, you are 100% stupid and wrong. Because, yeah, games are absolutely art. And some can be more artistic or artsy-fartsy or whatever you want to call it than others, but absolutely, I mean, it's 2016. Games are an art form. Come on. Next step for me is the next step for Art Machine, and we're making a new game. Like, our main focus right now is we're doing QA and certification stuff for ports for PS4 and Xbox One and Vita and stuff like that for Hyperlight. And I still have Kickstarter things that I am focused on, but, you know, I'm not working on Hyperlight full time, so I'm doing pre-production on the next game. So, can't tell you anything. I'm going to do the opposite of what I did with Hyperlight. I'm not going to say anything about it other than like, yep, we're working on a new game. And then, you know, when we're ready to show something, we'll be ready to show something. Bye, everybody. Thanks for having me on, and I would be happy to be on another episode soon. It's a pain. It's a super pain. Don't be jealous.
Yeah, trying to grow one since my childhood.
If you like eating hair or grow a beard,